Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today we are joined by author and master salesman Ben Gay III. He is well known for having written this sales closing Bible, The Closers Part 1, and of course, The Closers Part 2, among several other pieces of well-known sales literature. A little known fact, he was also personally mentored by Napoleon Hill, the famed author of Think and Grow Rich and several other self-help motivational books. And he was also the personal coach for the Apollo 11 team, the team that went out into space. Ben, it's a real pleasure to be speaking with you today. Thank you very much for taking the time, and thank you for sharing a little bit of insight. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing fine. And so Neil Armstrong isn't mad at me. I
Yeah,
knew him, but I was the coach, attitude coach for Apollo 15, 16, and 17.
incredible,
But I
incredible.
knew them all. I've shaken the hands of everybody that walked on the moon and all the people up at the command module circling.
Oh my gosh.
And so on. It was a fascinating time. I made a valuable contribution to them, but it had nothing to do with rocketry and all that stuff. It,
That is
it was
what
it,
a pleasure.
it was attitude. My pleasure, sir.
Well, Ben, let's start from the beginning here, if we will. Let's from the very beginning. What has been your trajectory in sales? How did you get into it, and what has been your overall life experience with sales?
Well, where the hook got set in my mouth was I was 11
Hmm.
and I won a citywide contest in Atlanta, Georgia, selling Krispy Kreme donuts
Hmm.
to raise the money to put the gold dome on the Georgia Capitol, which you see whenever they use the backdrop for Atlanta.
Mhm.
My portion was probably about that big. Gold being rather expensive. But anyway, that's why. And I won. I beat everybody in the city. Didn't know that I was going to. Wasn't even trying to. Really, I was just enjoying sampling the donuts as I sold them. And I won a red Columbia bicycle
Hmm.
and was number one. And ever since that, my father was a salesperson. Everybody in the family, aunts, uncles, everybody owned their own business or worked for my father selling.
Hmm.
So I grew up in a sales environment, but that was when it got personalized to me. I thought, oh, this isn't something they do; it's something I can do. And then at age 14, I was sitting on the sofa doing nothing during the summer. My father came in to go play golf or something. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, you can't do nothing.
Hmm.
You got to do something." And I said, "Well, do you have any suggestions?" This is a man, they used to have a self-winding watch.
Oh.
As you moved, it wound itself with a little weight inside. And he refused to get me one because he said it would always be running down.
Hmm.
It required movement to keep it wound.
Hmm.
And I wasn't insulted by that. I thought it was sort of funny, but it was probably true. So he said, "Why don't you mow lawns?" This is the growing season in Atlanta. "Why don't you mow lawns?" I said, because I didn't want to. But I said, "I don't have a lawnmower." And he said, "Sure, you probably have seen it down in the basement. It's the
Hmm.
family lawnmower. It was
Hmm.
motorized, rotary." He said, "Feel free to borrow that. Now get out of here and go set up some lawn appointments." So I did. I mowed a couple of lawns for $2 or $3 a piece. And he came in the next day, I think, or late that afternoon. "So what are you doing sitting here again?" I said, "One, I don't like mowing lawns. It's hot and humid in Atlanta. Two, there's no money in it." He said, "That's because you're not doing it right."
Hmm.
He said, "But I wanted to get you to that point."
Hmm.
So he said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to develop a little script, and you go call on the neighbors and tell them that you'll mow their lawns and or have it mowed,
Hmm.
and that you will collect when the job is done and they're happy with it. And when they ask how much is it, say it's totally up to you. Pay me
Hmm.
whatever you think it's worth." So I did a couple times. And then I said, "But there's no future in this." The good news was they paid me $5 instead of $2. So I had, and this, you got to go back a lot of years for this to understand it. But uh, I said, "Well," he said, "hire some of your friends." And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" He said, "You're making 2.5 times what you were making by yourself. Give them half the money."
Mm.
You sell the jobs, you inspect, you collect, you give him half the money, which is about the same or more than they would make if they were out doing it themselves. And you have a little business going.
Mm.
Before that summer was over, I had 25 kids working for me. I was making more money than most of the adults in the neighborhood were making
Oh.
during the growing season. It wasn't a year long,
Mm.
but and I was making grossing 10, 15, $20 a job instead of $2. So I could pay them generously. They got half of whatever I got. And we were mowing just about every lawn in a 5, 6 square block area,
Mm.
and busier than the devil from early in the morning to late at night. And he said, now you own a business. So I
Mm.
did that for a few years. And then it's funny how fates happens. I was standing outside my high school senior year, and a friend of mine came out, and I said, "Hey, I didn't have to be anywhere. I had taken all the classes necessary to graduate. So I was really just sort of hanging out." And a friend of mine came out, Jerry Bell, and I said, "Where are you going, Jerry?" He was heading to his car, and he said, "I'm going down to Macy's." It's called Davison's in Atlanta back then, but heading down to Macy's. I've got a job, thanks to my girlfriend, taking back returns the day after Christmas.
Mm.
I said, "Can I ride along?" I didn't want the job. I just, something to do. And he said, "Sure." So I went in the personnel department with him. And this nice lady named Barbara Franz said, "Do you want a job too?" And I said, "Oh, I guess." She said, "We'll pay you 2 weeks of training, 8 hours a day for one day of work."
Wow.
Pardon me, I'm very sorry. So I said, "Okay." I figured 2 weeks plus a day. And then I found that out on the floor, I was very good at selling. I was only there during the training afternoons and so on, but I was the number one salesman in the housewares department at Macy's. I
Mm.
was 17 years old, and except to buy a few things for my mother, I'd never been in a department store.
Mm.
Here's the key to that several years of a career. I heard Barbara Franz say that she was going on vacation and wouldn't be back for 2 weeks, starting the day after Christmas.
Mm.
And I thought, that's interesting. So I worked the day after Christmas like I was supposed to. And the next day I came back and walked up to the housewares department, rang in, and everybody said, "Oh, you're back." And I said, "Oh, yeah." Barbara hired me indefinitely. Really? And maybe somebody called the personnel department, but I knew she wasn't there. So 2 weeks later, when she appeared, I was the number one salesperson in the housewares department and their head of stock, which is a glorified stock boy, but I kept the floor full while selling it.
Mhm.
And she walks in behind me, and she knows she hired me for one day. And
Mhm.
I'm now head of stock and the number one salesperson in the department. And I looked at her and I thought, "Oh, got my life flash in front of me."
Mhm.
And she said, "Nicely played, Mr. Gay." And I said, "Can I stay?" She said, "You're the number one salesperson. Of course you can stay." So quickly following that, assistant buyer in a couple of small departments. I was the youngest buyer in Macy's then 100-year history. Uh, but I got there by being a salesperson. Once
Mm.
again, I was semi-famous because I was out selling people who'd been there for 30 years and knew the inventory, which I didn't
Mm.
necessarily. Uh, so that was that. Then I became a manufacturer's rep and traveled on the road. A couple of people calling on me as a buyer offered me jobs working for them. So I went out on the road and learned road selling, which
Mhm.
is entirely, as a manufacturer's rep, entirely different. And somewhere along the line, really realizing I had to make more money, I picked up the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, saw a little bitty ad. As it turned out, it ran one day.
Mhm.
It said, "If you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, dial this number." I dialed the number. I didn't know what a marketing plan was, but I wanted to make more money. Got an appointment, walked in. This is Wednesday, September 15th, 1965 at noon. I walked into this office, having had a little interview on the phone. Oh, by the way, I was interviewing him to see if he was qualified to hire me. And in
Mm.
the middle of my conversation calling from a phone booth. You're not old enough probably to have ever used a phone booth, but they had an unusual sound. It sounded like you were calling from inside a garbage can.
Oh,
Echo.
yeah.
And so in the middle of my interview of him, Bill Dempsey said to me, "Mr. Gay, I'm not the man standing in a phone booth answering want ads. Where are you?" And I told him, turned out I was 2 blocks from his office.
Wow.
So he said, "Be here." And I think he gave me 10 minutes. Be stand in front of my desk 10 minutes, or don't ever dial this number again. He hung up. He's running, paying for ads to get people to call, and he hangs up on what turned out one of the only 2 people that answered the ad. I walk in, announced myself, said to the receptionist, "My name is Ben Gay. I'm here for the appointment." She said, "Have a seat." And as I turn around, this curly-headed guy sitting on the sofa, obviously also waiting for something, said, "Ben Gay." Well, I'm used to Ben Gay jokes, so I said, "Okay, what's yours? Don't rub it in." And he said, "No, I hadn't thought of that one." I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Zig Ziglar."
Mm.
I said, "With a name like Zig Ziglar, you're making fun of Ben Gay? You got to be kidding me." I'd never heard of him, nor had anyone else. And but he had answered the same ad.
Mhm.
So we joined the business together. I had a partner, Jimmy Rucker. And 2 years later, I was president of what was then the largest MLM direct sales company in the world,
Wow.
bigger than Amway and Shackley combined. And I was 25 years old.
Wow.
So it's a long answer to a short question, but the thread that runs through all of those is selling.
Mm.
I have been a salesperson. I don't remember a time when I wasn't a salesperson. Before the 11-year-old victory selling Krispy Kreme donuts, I
Mhm.
was always the top guy selling lottery, tickets, lottery ticket, whatever, to raise money for this or that. Didn't
Mhm.
get any money out of it, but I enjoyed being number one. And
And
and then they ask you, when you're the number one salesman in Atlanta and you're making in 1965 dollars, you're making pretty quick. I was making 10,000 a month. That's 100,000 a month today. And rather quickly, after that, I was making 40,000 a month. That's 400,000 a month in today's dollars. So on Saturday at the sales meeting, they say, "Ben, come up and tell them what you're doing."
Mhm.
And you get up and you do a little thing, and they were kind enough to laugh in the right places and applaud in the right places. Now I'm hooked on sales training. I wasn't very good,
Mhm.
but I was good enough to beat everybody else. All I did was tell them what I was doing,
Mhm.
and led up through the ladder. And then I won a national sales contest year long.
Wow.
And the number one prize was a mystery prize. Number two was a Rolls Royce.
Mhm.
Next, I think, was a Lincoln Continental. I won the mystery prize, was flown to California to find out what it was. Second prize was the Rolls. Zig got that. And my sponsor, who ran that little ad, got the Lincoln Continental. So there were 3 winners sitting in that room that day. We just didn't know it yet. And then I flew to California, and the owner of the company, William Penpatrick, took me to dinner and told me what the mystery prize was.
Mhm.
I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Presidency of the company." I
Wow.
said, I said, "Why didn't you say that's what it was?" He said, "Well, if somebody won it that I didn't like, I would change what the prize was."
Ex-
Fortunately, he said, "I know you and I like you, so
mm.
you can be president. We've got to make some moves, move some chess pieces around, but you're going to be president. Sit still, and I'm going to pay you as if you were president starting today."
Mhm.
So
That's
that's it.
Ben, that's incredible. What do you think was the key to your success, even going back to the Macy's days? Because obviously you're number one then, you're number one in the lawn, mowing the lawns you started. Was it, do you think it came naturally to you, or this, what would you think was your key to success all along there?
Well, I didn't even know what to call it at the time, but going back to the lawn mowing story, my father taught me a script, a
Mm.
plan presentation. When they opened the door, I was cocked and ready to go. It wasn't, "Hey, how you doing?" and so on. "Hi, my name's Ben Gay. Here's my card." Rather quickly, I had some little cards, my phone number printed up. And you've probably seen us around in the neighborhood. And here's the deal: we'll
Mm.
mow your lawn. You set the price. You don't have to pay us anything if you don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. and virtually everyone took the offer unless they already had somebody or a teenager themselves. They took the offer. So scripted presentation was a huge part of it. Part of it was I have a semi-good personality. I was voted wittiest in my senior year in high school. However, I was thrown out of that high school, sent to private school. My father had money, so I didn't have to go to reform school. Got thrown out of there and graduated high school on my third attempt. So I was so witty, I got thrown out of 2 high schools
Oh,
being witty. So a little personality was certainly a factor, but you can learn that. You can build it into a script. But here's my real secret as life went on. I only sell quality products and services that are competitively priced, and I spend my days talking to qualified people. I never knocked on a door in an apartment building, for instance, with my lawn mowing service. It had to be your house or appear to be your house. And then over time, I tried to become a person of class, quality, and substance, which I didn't really understand, but now I do. So that part A, quality product competitively priced, talk to qualified people, become a person of class, quality, and substance. And then back to basics. My father, who was very successful selling, he was a food broker later in life. I said, what's the secret, Dad? He said, come early, stay late, work on weekends, do the jobs nobody else wants to do, and learn your presentation. But the key was come early, stay late. When the boss came in at Macy's or Holiday Magic or whatever, when the people who could affect my career came in, I was already there. And come early sometimes meant finding out when they came. So I was not only early, I was systematically early. You were known for coming into the office at 6:30, then 6 o'clock for me. I didn't want to look like I just got there. I want the cup of coffee on the desk and, oh, hi, how are you? And then stay late meant later than them. So I was there. I greeted them in the morning, the people important to my career, and I waved goodbye to them at night. Come early, stay late, work. And if they came in on weekends for whatever reason, guess who was there? Me. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. So Lincoln said, if you develop a reputation of being an early riser, you can get up at noon.
Oh,
So I developed a reputation of being an early riser, hard worker, etc.
incredible. Now, it's fascinating that you rub shoulders with some of the greats, Ben. Like you mentioned, Zig Ziglar, several. Jim Rohn. You mentioned that this was through Holiday Magic. Is
right. Holiday Magic Cosmetics, and we had 5 major subsidiary companies: Motor Oil Additives, it's called Stay Power, et cetera, et cetera. So we had, pardon me, a total of 5 major companies. And the 6th company, we started the modern human potential movement, the forerunner to Est and LifeSpring and all of, and the Forum and all those, Cyworld. They all started in our building in San Rafael, California, with Mind Dynamics, which was using the subconscious mind and so on, and Leadership Dynamics, which was one of the first encounter groups, Rough and Tumble. So between we were biggest in 6 different categories simultaneously and eventually in 20 different countries.
Were you a little bit of a different question, but were you prepared for the presidency? Because that's a little bit, I imagine that must be different, a little bit of a different skill set, different role. What was that like transitioning from being a
what I did, I had people in place. We already had a vice president of finance and a vice president of the legal department and so on and so on and so on. So what I learned rather quickly was use all them. I'm a high school graduate. I can't outwit one of the top chemists in the world. Mort Scott was his name. He invented bromo seltzer. Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. You have both in your house, I'll bet you. And so on. So there's no point in trying to outwit him, nor does he need me. Errol Lipska was doing the books and doing the finance stuff, and he'd run it by me because I was president. But most of the time, I didn't really know what he was talking about. I would just nod and look at the bottom line and see if we made money. You never want that bottom right-hand figure on the last page to be in brackets.
Oh.
That's a loss. You know? So if it wasn't in brackets and a reasonably acceptable number, which I learned what that was, I was the leader, the coordinator, etc. But I spent a lot of time on the road, whipping huge crowds into a frenzy because the president of the company is coming to town. So
Yeah.
one sort of feeds the other.
Mm-hmm.
One leads to the other. And I became a very good speaker, not in the beginning, but a very good speaker, had some ups and downs there.
Mm-hmm.
A gentleman introduced me to my first semi-large crowd, 5,000 people. Ern Westmore, the dean of Hollywood makeup artists, yelled my name to introduce me. He wanted to have the honor of introducing me. Yelled my name, Benjamin Franklin Gay the Third, and before the D of third came out of his mouth, he dropped dead on stage of
Wow.
a massive heart attack in
Oh,
front of 5,000 people. What do you do?
wow.
And the spotlight had already hit me, you know, as I was coming up the steps, or else I would have run. I was perfectly prepared. I knew right where the door was behind me. I would have been up the steps and out to my room and pretending like, was I supposed to be on today? I didn't know that. Yeah, Ern Westmore died.
That's
Really? You know, I'm so sorry to hear that. But when they hauled him off, they said to me, the medical people and the doctors in the audience, two or three came up. They said to me, he's dead. And I knew that. There's a difference when somebody gets dizzy and falls or faints versus being shot with an elephant gun. You know, you're standing and boom, you're not standing. So I knew he was dead, but
Wow.
I waited for them to put him on the Stokes litter and wheel him out. When he got to the door, I said to them, since he was dead, I said, gentlemen, stop 1 second, please. They stopped. And I said, I had lunch with Ern Westmore today, met him for the first time, saw that he took heart pills, nitroglycerin tablets. He took them like they were M&Ms. And so he was overweight and a variety of things. So I said to him, Ern, if you had to go today, sort of prophetic because he went that night, how would you like to go? And he
Wow.
said, on stage, talking to a large crowd of women about beauty. He was a
Wow.
makeup specialist.
Yes.
And I said, ladies and gentlemen, Ern got his wish. Let's give him one last standing ovation. They almost tore the place apart.
Wow.
Now the spotlight's back on me. What the hell am I going to do? And
Yeah.
the answer was, you
Yes.
were supposed to give a scripted presentation. Good, give it. So I said, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben Gay. I'm a general distributor with Holiday Magic and president of the company soon. And it's my pleasure to welcome you. This is scripted. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special meeting. And I went on for 47 minutes, word for word. And we close. Normally in a big crowd like that, half of them were distributors, half were prospects. So 2,500 prospects. We'd expect to get about half of them because you're not one-on-one with everybody. We got almost 90% of them that night. So I've
Wow.
told audiences and budding speakers over the years, if you want to know how to make a lot of money in a group presentation, get a famous person to introduce you and die on stage. That's
Wow.
sort of hard to do, but if you find one who's willing, I'm telling you, it works like a charm.
That's an incredible story. Holy
Yeah.
smokes. I'm glad you carried on. Ben, brief aside here, Zig Ziglar. That's almost a household name as far as selling goes. It's very similar to Bengay the Third. What did you recognize something in Zig Ziglar even back then? Was there something that you think made him unique or special or?
Yeah, Zig, first of all, he was 18 years older than I was. He was in the Navy the day I was born.
Mm,
And so he had that little edge, but he grew up in the church. So
mm,
his speaking experiences was churches and some sales meetings because he was selling cookware, but he
mm,
was sort of like me. He was the sales trainer at
mm.
fill in the blank company because he was also one of their top cookware salespeople, but he wasn't making a lot of money. He'd never had a big hit. Hence, he was answering an ad in the Atlanta Journal Constitution
Mhm.
that said, if you know anything about marketing plans. So, but he was special in that Zig came out of his mother's womb, laughing, giggling, and telling jokes. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
He was a one, I tell audiences, you can't be Zig Ziglar. He was one of a kind. You
Wow.
can't be Tony Robbins unless you take growth hormones and have a keyboard set in your mouth and so on. And you can't be Tom Hopkins and so on, so on. But you can be you. And the good news is you can be better than all of them. I beat them all. You asked earlier about qualified to be president. No, I wasn't, which is how I met Dr. Hill. Bill Patrick, the owner of the company, got some sort of award from Dr. Hill as one of the 5 greatest Americans currently living or something. I forget what it was exactly. And that's why he was in the building. I didn't even know he was there. And pretty quick, there was a knock on my door, office door, and the door opened. That told me it was Bill Patrick. He would knock as a courtesy, but he didn't wait to be invited in. And so I look up and there's Bill Patrick and this little older gentleman leaning on a cane. And so being a Southerner, I stood up, ran around my conference table. And I said, "Hi, my name's Ben Gay." And Bill looked at me like I was from Mars. He said, "Ben, this is Dr. Napoleon Hill." Well, he didn't look like he looks in all his old publicity pictures, with that high collar, which he hated, by the way. I'd seen pictures of him only as a younger person. And I said, "Well, a pleasure to meet you, sir. I didn't know you were here." And Bill said, I've asked Dr. Hill to do us a favor." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I've asked him to be your mentor or coach or whatever they called it in those days." He said, "Ben, I know that there are times," my office was in the very front of a long building, his was in the back. "I know there are times when you'd like to walk down the hall and ask me a question, but you're afraid if you do, it will reveal that you're not qualified to be president of the company. You're doing a great job, but you and I know technically, only in a company you grew up through would you be president. IBM is not going to hire you, not to be president anyway." So I've asked Dr. Hill to work with you as much time as you want. You can go back to him. He can come out to see you, and unlimited time on the phone, and so on, and be your coach. And I said, "Great." I thought I need this like I need a third foot, but turned out one of the best things that ever happened to me. He came to work for me as my mentor. And we were in the process of setting up a third seminar company called Mentoring Dynamics when he died. But it didn't require him to do anything, but it required him to be there when 2 or 3 weeks when we're training people so they could say they met Dr. Hill, they were personally trained by Dr. Hill, and so on. Everybody on the planet now, I'm the only one who can say that.
That's incredible.
They're all gone. So, which is one of the benefits. When we met, he was 84, I think, and I was 25. He was biologically old enough to be my great grandfather. So at the end, it turned out we paid him. I found out later in the day as I was signing checks, we paid him $50,000 in 1965 dollars. That's $500,000 now, to be my mentor. It reminds me of Rodney Dangerfield, the old comedian. Said he was so ugly that parents had to tie a pork chop around his neck so the family dog would play with him. Bill had to tie a $50,000 check around my neck so I would get the benefit of working with Dr. Hill. And at the end of the first year, I said to Bill, "Dr. Hill is hinting around, do we want him to do another year? What do you think?" He said, "It's your money. That's totally up to you." I discovered the first year was a gift. The second year was on me. So I wrote him the second check. And I think the third check, because he died 2.5 years after I met him, in which case the Napoleon Hill estate owes me about $25,000 because he didn't live out his third year.
Ben, I mean, let's briefly talk a little bit more about Napoleon Hill, because Think and Grow Rich is perhaps one of the best-selling books, self-help books of all times.
Second only to the Bible.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that book. A lot of it is, there it is. Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible wisdom. I think a lot of it is positive thinking, but what did Napoleon Hill share with you? What did he share with you? What did he instill? What was it like being around him? What was he like?
He became a friend. At
Mhm.
first, we were like two dogs that had just been introduced to each other, that was sort of circling around. I didn't know if I needed him. He's wondering, except for the money, why am I having to deal with this 25-year-old punk?
Mhm.
Uh, Neither one of us ever said it out loud, but I could feel it, you know. But within a month, let's say, many meetings,
Mhm.
lots of phone calls. He was still in Columbia, South Carolina. We got where we just really liked each other. He stayed. I had a big conference table as a desk. His seat was at the end of the table to my left, and no one else from the day he joined us ever sat in that chair, even when he was in South Carolina and the chair was in California. That was Dr. Hill's chair. And up at the house, we were blessed with a nice large house in Marin County. There was Dr. Hill's bedroom,
Mhm.
and no one, if I had family in and we got crowded, I probably would have broken the rule, but basically no one stayed in Dr. Hill's bedroom.
Mhm.
So he was around me as time went on as a friend,
Mhm.
and I could be direct with him and he could be direct with me. First lunch I ever had with him, we went to a little local restaurant near the office,
Mhm.
and we were still at the stage where he's quoting from Think and Grow Rich and the Law of Success, and I'm trying to say something profound that I've thought of, And
Mhm.
he said, he was eating a salad. He picked up a bunch of salad with his fork, got it up to his mouth, and said before starting to eat, "Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve."
Mhm.
And I said, unless he's crazy. And the fork froze in the air, and he put it down. He said, "What'd you say?" I said, "Unless he's crazy."
Mhm.
We have people join our business all the day, all the time. They're going to make $1 million by Saturday, and they
Mhm.
believe that part time, and
Mhm.
it's not going to happen. They're incredibly ignorant, unrealistic, and so on. Not going to happen. And the mental homes are filled with people who believe they're Napoleon or Jesus or what have you.
Mhm.
So that's one of the statements in Think and Grow Rich I'm not terribly fond of, unless it's taken with a grain of salt and enough maturity to know it's not necessarily true. I
Mhm.
wanted to be an astronaut, and I was in position as a speaker to become one of the first citizen astronauts.
Mhm.
On the flight Christy McCullough was on, was sort of the seat I was aiming for.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I didn't get it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, Christy did. Uh, but I want to be an astronaut. I'm a high school graduate. At that time, I'd never taken flying lessons, although we owned a small Air Force and a flight school. I was too busy to go take lessons. So
Mhm.
looking back, probably being an astronaut wasn't realistic, but
Mhm.
I conceived it and
Mhm.
I believed it, you know.
Mhm.
So that was one. So Dr. Hill and I then worked out a thing that we could both be comfortable with. A
Mhm.
person can achieve almost any goal as long as it's specific,
Mhm.
measurable,
Mhm.
and attainable. People say, well, that's negative, attainable. No, it's sanity.
Mhm.
There are things,
Mhm.
you'd like to play in the NBA, I bet,
Sure.
and make that kind of money. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't want to be the one to break it to you. It's not going to happen.
Mm. Nice.
you
Of
know,
course,
and I
absolutely.
don't, you can set it and believe it and so on. It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
So specific, measurable, and attainable can happen
Mm.
a lot more than people realize.
Interesting. Interesting. So he was Dr. Hill of Napoleon. He was open to this dialogue, and of course, he was receptive to these ideas.
Yeah, we laughed about, let's not announce this from the stage.
Mhm.
You can talk about specific, measurable, attainable, but don't say in lieu of that crazy statement in Think and Grow Rich.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, I won't rat you out. You don't rat me out. Here's one. He walked into our home the first time he ever visited there. And my wife at the time, she's now passed away,
Sorry.
Marcia, had put Think and Grow Rich on the coffee table, not only on the coffee table,
No.
face up, but aimed so as you entered the living room, you came in sort of at an angle. It
Mhm.
was perfectly aimed at where you would come in. And I was
Mhm.
embarrassed. I thought, oh my God, that's a little tacky.
Mhm.
Marcia's trying to make him believe we sit around reading Think and Grow Rich every night as a family.
That's,
And I said, "Oh, Dr. Hill, look, Think and Grow Rich." And,
mhm,
and I said, "How does it feel?" Trying to get through this awkward moment. How
mhm,
does it feel to have written what some say is the best-selling book, second only to the Bible, in the world?
mhm.
And he said, best-selling, least read. He
Interesting.
he had a real clear understanding on buying. And
Mhm,
I have a book here
mhm,
somewhere.
mhm.
I won't spend a lot of time looking for it. Think and Grow Rich. This is a
Yeah,
75-year-old copy.
incredible.
It's endorsed by Napoleon Hill to Mrs. Grace Dixon, with
Mm,
best wishes, Napoleon Hill.
wow.
Now, I've been in the publishing business a long time. Study
Mhm.
this book. There's the front. What color is that?
Red,
What color is the back?
red.
What color is the spine?
Well, that's off red. I mean, a faint red. What a white? What?
Bleached out.
Exactly.
Here's how Mrs. Grace Dixon got that. I don't know her. And the
Hmm.
book's 75 years old, bought at a garage sale by a friend of mine for 50 cents and
Hmm.
given to me as a present. Thought you'd enjoy this.
Hmm.
When I opened it or started to open it, I discovered that the only part of it that had cracked was when he opened it to sign it. The rest of the pages are still as tight as they were when they left the publisher, and I haven't opened them and won't.
Okay.
Mrs. Grace Dixon read an ad, whatever.
Yeah.
Dr. Hill was coming to town.
Hmm.
She went down there, maybe had to pay to get in. I don't know. And
Hmm.
then while there, Dr. Hill would, like a good sales trainer today, would sell his books from the stage. She
Mm.
then got and promised to sign them. She obviously got in line,
Hmm.
waited, having paid maybe extra. I don't know. Well, she had to buy a book, that was extra,
Hmm.
and had Dr. Hill sign it. And then she did what everybody, not everybody, but what 99% of all people do with a book like this. She took it home, showed it to her friends,
Hmm.
and stuck it in the bookcase, and there it sat for 75 years. She never read it. She never read this copy. She may have read
Oh,
another one, but she
yes.
never read that one. And that's typical in the business. I
Yeah.
want to be a top salesman. Do you own the closers?
Mhm.
Best-selling book on selling and closing ever written?
Yeah,
No, I was planning to get it. How long have you been in selling? 20 years. How long did you plan to get it? You know,
exactly.
and
There it
then
is.
then I sign all the books that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't for the first few million, but I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to those people, I have your book. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, did I sign it? Yes, that means they bought it in the last 25 years or so. Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. Invariably, they fail the questions
Mm-hmm.
because they've never read the book. They're
Mm-hmm.
the salesperson's version of Mrs. Grace Dixon. They
Mm-hmm.
believe if they buy it, that
Mm-hmm.
accomplishes it. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you, I know, have read your copies.
I have.
Talked about it. I can tell in 2 or 3 minutes where somebody knows what they're talking about. When I said sales infiltration, the last chapter in part 2, you went, oh, yeah. Well, you wouldn't have that reaction if you hadn't read it.
I have. I've read both.
Yeah,
Well, let's talk about Napoleon Hill. That's Think and Grow Rich. The briefly, I mean, just beside the title, it's Think and Grow Spiritually Rich, because that besides I think it changed my life. That Napoleon Hill book. I was
super.
a negative thinker, and that really brought my perspective into much more positive thinking. Of course, many other things. The Closers Part 1. Here we go. This was recommended to me by the founder, my mentor, Kevin Demerit at the company. Upon his recommendation, I got this book immediately. It came with your contact information. That's when I reached out to you. I said, it can't hurt to converse with the one and only Ben Gay. And so here we are having this wonderful conversation. But I didn't know that you are the editor of this. Share the
Right.
story with us, please, Ben, because and maybe that's why I appreciate the second one more. You didn't write this. You did not
No,
write this.
I
You
didn't write the
no.
original version. No.
Correct. So,
I created the call center industry. Dial
mhm,
800 to buy whatever.
mhm,
The very first one opened in 1976 here in this town,
mhm,
called the National Communication Center.
mhm,
85% of all Americans did not know that an 800 number was toll free. Therefore, the advertisers didn't run them because
mhm,
they were also very expensive. So I
mhm,
figured a way to timeshare an 800 number.
mhm,
They were 10,000 a month in advance, and that got you 240 hours. Well,
mhm,
most people couldn't or wouldn't do that. So I got a number. I still own it,
Mhm.
and issued operator numbers to, let's say you were a client, operator number 100.
Mhm.
So that somebody call in, thank you for calling, how may I help you? Operator 100, please. Or back then, before a computer everywhere, they would turn to a big catalog on their desk with ultimately 1,800 pages in it. They turn to page 100 quickly where you couldn't see it or hear it and
Mhm.
say, hi, this is operator 100 with sharper image. And
Mhm.
I've been asked to take it, read the script and sell them. So that was how we did it. But we were
Mhm.
short on people who needed them. So everybody had an assignment. Somebody had the National Enquirer, somebody had Look magazine or whatever was available back then.
Mhm.
And I had the Wall Street Journal.
Mhm.
And one day I'm flipping through it, had my little X-Acto knife, where you cut out things precisely. And I
Mhm.
saw a little ad. It said something about closing. What I really noticed was it didn't have an 800 number,
Mhm.
nor did it have enough about it where I was sure, I wasn't sure what it was. It had closing somewhere in it, maybe closers,
Mhm.
but no 800 numbers. So I cut it out, sent it
Mhm.
down to word processing, where a series of 6 letters
Mhm.
started going out. Hi, here's your ad. But the one thing you're missing, and sales will go up 40% if you have an 800 number and da da da.
Mhm.
It also said something about send a check. And I looked at it and I thought, that may be a book on selling. So
Mhm.
I wrote a personal check, clipped it to the typing request, sent it downstairs. If nothing had ever happened, I would not know. It
Mhm.
wasn't a big thing in my life. If they had never sent the book, I never would have known or cared. All
Mhm.
I wanted them to do was sign up for an 800 number.
Mhm.
So I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks later, this package arrived that today, if I got a package like that, I'd call the bomb squad.
Mhm.
Horrible packaging. It was like they took shirt cardboard and wrapped it to fit the book instead of having an envelope.
Mhm.
And on the address looked like it was written by a chimpanzee with a marker pen. So I looked and I thought, what is this? And I opened it up
Mhm.
and it's The Closers.
Mhm.
Blue, that's about the only thing in common with the current book.
Mhm.
So I opened it up, and like I was just talking about with Think and Go Rich, I fanned the pages,
Mhm.
like you do. What did I get?
Mhm.
Pages shot all over the office. They,
Mhm.
the people who printed the book didn't know how to run a bindery, and they snuck into a guy's plant at night,
Mhm.
unbeknownst to him, and
Mhm.
printed the book and bound it and so on. They
Mhm.
also didn't proofread the book.
Mm.
So I thought, well, I've lost whatever it was. Worse things have happened to me. I scooped it all up and was going to throw it in the trash can. But
Mhm.
I thought, well, this is before in-flight movies and all that stuff. Uh,
Mhm.
I thought I'll take it with me on the plane, look through it, and then I'll leave it in the back seat pocket and I'm done with it. So I
Mhm.
did that. 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm on a flight to New York,
Mhm.
find this thing in my Hartman briefcase,
Mhm.
got it out, put a few pages in order so I could start reading it. And rather quickly, poorly written, misspelled, bad grammar. It looked like it was that. It looked like the chimpanzee that addressed the package to me.
Yes.
But buried in it, it's
Mhm.
like you're talking to somebody who doesn't speak English, so you can barely make them out, but you sort of know because they use this word and that word and so on.
Mhm.
Buried within it, I felt like I'd found the Dead Sea Scrolls. There was,
Mm.
and so I read. I'm a speed reader, read about 3,500 words a minute. So I was able to get through most or all of it between San Francisco and New York. And by the time I landed, I
Mhm.
went to one of those dreaded payphones,
Mhm.
no cell phone,
Mhm.
dialed the number in the book, and I said to the person who answered the phone, "Hi, hi, I just finished reading The Closers," and this guy, his name was Roy Brandley. Roy said, "Well, Mr. Gay, how are you?" And I said, "I didn't say my name. No
Mhm.
caller ID. I thought I was on candid camera or something." I said, "I didn't say my name." He
Mhm.
said, "Well, we published that book. We printed 500 copies. We ran one ad for one day in the Wall Street Journal. So
Mhm.
if you read The Closers, your name is Ben Gay. You're from Placerville, California, because you're the only book we sold."
Mhm. Wow. Oh, well,
So
incredible.
they sold one. I've since sold 10.5 million when we quit counting 25 years ago. So I don't even know what the number is now. But the nub of a good idea was there. And I said to him, how many more do you have? Because
Mm-hmm.
I've got people I can give it to without even feeling bad for free.
Mm-hmm.
He said, like I said, we printed 500. We sold one.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to go look. We have 499 left. I said, I'll take them,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to negotiate being able to rewrite it, publish it properly, have it done by a professional printer, and have the rights to it.
Mm-hmm.
Deal. And I forget what we paid back then,
Mm-hmm.
50 cents a copy royalty or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we got the closers. So that's the reason it says editor. I don't claim to have written it.
No.
And inside, on about the fourth or fifth page, I give credit to the person who claims to have written it. And I have doubts about that. His name is Jim Pickens, but I think he recently died.
Oh, wow.
Because I've seen other books that are thought for thought remarkably similar to the closers.
Ben, as an editor, and we've spoken in previous sessions about this, but there's so much wisdom in here. Just a quick question, because some of those techniques are a little bit, I don't know, I wouldn't call them of a different time, but for example, when you're in front of the family and he's asking the pretty assertive questions in front of the kids, almost to the point of embarrassing the customer. What did you think when you were going through those? Has that crossed your mind that some of these techniques,
Sure.
yeah, because I'm
Yeah.
sure you know what I'm referring to. Some of those techniques seem
Oh,
they
yeah. There are several
effective.
things in there that are not politically acceptable or even smart. But
Oh,
I've elected not to change it because people need to know the red, raw meat of selling, the kicks, the
yes.
blocks, and the punches. So
Mm-hmm.
I've left it alone. And
Mm-hmm.
then I wrote the Closers Part Two, and there's other books in the series, but those are the Closers Part Two. That's what sophisticated people,
Mm-hmm.
honest people really do with the
Mm-hmm.
red raw information in the Closers Part One.
Mm-hmm.
There's a section in there that might offend Black people, people of color, as we say today. And you know the chapter I'm talking about.
Yeah.
One day in a seminar somewhere, a guy stood up and said, Mr. Gay, a Black gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Gay, I've read the book in chapter whatever. Uh, that's where if you're a white person calling on a Black customer, be sure
Mm-hmm.
and ask for a glass of water or something.
That's true. Yes.
So
And if you drink
you
it, then
you
yes,
drink from the glasses they drink from. And
that is.
he said, that's horribly offensive. And I said, I'm absolutely sorry. And he turned to the audience and said, but true.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, if
I
you
can.
call, he went on to say, if you call on me and you're a white guy and I offer you a glass of water and you put it aside and never get around to drinking it, I won't buy what you're selling
Mm-hmm.
because I know what you're thinking. So there's some rough spots in there like that. But I made the decision in any old book, there are
Mm-hmm.
things that don't fit to today's times.
Yeah.
Closers Part Two, though, has kept up. There's
Yeah.
not a word in there I would take back.
Well, no, and I wasn't saying to take something back. It just seemed that some of the techniques, like there was a part where you have to, not to the point of embarrassment, but it's verging
Sure.
on, in front of the lot of the family. But in the closers part one, for those new to sales, because there's a very valuable section in the beginning of the book where it breaks down the profiles of the customers and the different types
Absolutely.
of, and that's
I wish that were in Part Two.
well.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about part two, because I finished this book, and one of the things that you mentioned, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, is selling the benefits. And that was selling the benefits. It's all throughout this book. And can you expand on that? How do we best sell benefits? And you cover it in a chapter here, but how could you expand on selling the benefits when we're
Well,
talking about
it's
product?
sort of back to basics. Somebody says, "Oh, I know that," but I go out with them on a sales call, and if they know it, that's wonderful. They don't use it. Uh,
Mm,
you get all the customer wants to know before he or she reaches in their pocket and gets out their money in whatever form and gives it to you is a satisfactory answer to what's in it for me.
mm-hmm,
That's I don't care what they say, what's in it. It's like people say it's not the money. If they
mm-hmm,
say it's not the money, it's the money.
mm-hmm. Okay.
So they're just truisms about selling. What the
Mm-hmm.
person wants to know is what's in it for me. The old adage is people don't buy quarter-inch drills.
Mhm.
They buy 1/4-inch holes.
Mhm.
The
Correct.
drill is how they get the hole.
Mhm.
So the benefit is the hole, the feature is the drill.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
air conditioning in a car, which used to be optional, believe it or not,
Mhm.
that was extra. Air
Mhm.
conditioning in a car is a feature. The
Mhm.
benefit is you don't sweat like a pig while you're driving around in the South in the summer.
Exactly.
So
And
just keep it separate in your mind. What's a feature?
mhm.
What's a benefit? The
Mhm.
benefit is, what does it do for you? How does it make your life easier, less expensive, more productive, whatever?
Mhm. And you have another phenomenal chapter on creating solutions. Essentially, what our job is to create. And I don't want to call them problems, but you have to create a good person at this job as actually able to create problems, find solutions. If somebody that does it well, somebody that does it very well. Can you expand on that? I think it's very similar to
Sure.
this drill and hole.
Well, yeah, Elmer Wheeler, the guy who said sell the sizzle, not the steak,
Mhm.
and caused an egg shortage in the United States, different story, but created single-handedly an egg shortage in the
Mhm.
United States with one phrase.
Mhm.
So he was a very effective wordsmith.
Mhm.
Uh, he said, find a need and fill it.
Mhm. Exactly.
Well, that's easy. And I can say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. First, you have to find the need and
Mhm.
agree, you and the customer, client, whatever,
Mhm.
agree that that is a problem, that there is that need. And so
Mhm.
you got to get them sales infiltration, the last chapter, get them to buy into the fact that there is a problem, whether you knew it before or not. The need is to fix the problem. And if they do, the benefit will be
Mhm.
whatever, more
Mhm.
happiness, you know. So it's really, there are so many cliches in life that people go, oh yeah, I've heard that before, but they
Mhm.
don't understand how it became a cliche. It
Mhm.
became a cliche by being true and getting repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated, primarily by people who never understood what it meant.
Mhm.
J. Douglas Edwards, the great sales trainer,
Mhm.
uh, who worked for me, and I wrote his book after he died, Sales Closing Power. He
Mhm.
said that if you have a built-in objection,
Mhm.
bring it up first and brag about it.
Mhm.
If you're selling Rolls Royces, the objection is the price. The
Mhm.
starter kit is $350,000.
Mhm.
So rather than sit there and waste 2 or 3 hours selling on a car that they can't afford, and hoping the other shoe doesn't drop, Doug said, bring it up first and brag about it. For
Mhm.
instance, if I used to do sales training for British Motors in San Francisco.
Mhm.
I taught them to always have a business card in their side pocket ready to go. And when
Mhm.
somebody came in, hi there, my name's Ben Gay, hand them the card.
Mhm.
Welcome to British Motors.
Mhm.
Happy to have you here today. Before we get started, let me tell you one of the great joys of working at British Motors selling Rolls Royces, and I think they sold Bentleys and a couple other things too, all of them expensive. One
Mhm.
of the great joys of working here is getting to know and meet people
Mhm.
like you who've done well enough in life to be able to invest $350,000 in a car.
Mhm.
So I get to know and work with people like you. And that for me is an honor. What you're really
Mhm.
saying is, as I'm staring at your irises,
Mhm.
I just told you the car was $350,000. If
Mhm.
your irises dilate or contract and
Mhm.
you spit up a little bit, I've
Mhm.
discovered you don't have $350,000 to invest in the car. So
Mhm.
let's discover that now. We have used cars, we have Bentleys, we have Jaguars, we have whatever, but
Mhm.
we need to know where you are before we start solving your problem. The fact you walked in the door of a Rolls Royce dealership doesn't mean anything. Your wife could be next door shopping for dresses, and you decide to come in and see what a Rolls Royce looks like.
Mhm.
So find a need and fill it is crucial, but you have to find out what the need is in depth and get them to agree with you that is a need, that is a problem that needs solving.
Excellent. And we're just about out of time here, Ben. But as far as let's say somebody's getting into sales, or what, so much wisdom between the closers part one and part two. what are your top recommendations for those in the sales industry that are maybe just getting into this or are wanting to advance? What is critical in sales? What do you say?
Find out what the winners are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Start studying. I'm prejudiced, but there are a lot of good sales books around. Start studying the closers.
Mm-hmm.
Start with this last chapter in part 2. It's called Sales Infiltration. It is, and I say this modestly, the
Mm-hmm.
best thing ever written about selling, ever written, not only by me, but by anyone. Read that every day in the beginning. It's only 30 or 40 pages. You knock it off rather quickly. Read it every day and get that in your head, and find the best, the most successful, honest salesperson in the dealership business, gold exchange, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
the best, most honest person.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Uh, I fell into a trap early in my career of modeling my sales techniques on people I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know it or care, frankly,
Mm-hmm.
that were dishonest.
Yeah.
Early Holiday Magic was filled with Arthur Murray dance instructors. No offense to any Arthur Murray dance instructor, but this is back when they used to sell lifetime memberships
Yes.
to 80-year-old women.
Yes.
And many of the 80-year-old women had 4 lifetime memberships.
Oh, geez.
My sponsor, Bill Dempsey, was not allowed in the state of North Carolina. There was an arrest warrant out for him because he was a great dancer, by the way. He was really a great dancer, but he was dishonest. He's dead now, so I could talk about it. He was dishonest. And I started modeling myself after him. And I told my father about a few early victories I had. And he said, "Where are you learning this stuff?" I said, "Well, Bill Dempsey." And he said to me, "Bill Dempsey is obviously a crook. Find the most honest, successful person you could find and model them." And then as scripts began appearing, I wrote some of the great ones. As scripts became appearing, one of the ways we standardized our meetings was a 47-minute word for word sales presentation. And then some people wouldn't abide by that. We sent private detectives into meetings as shoppers to sit in the meeting, and they would have a copy of the script. And you better say from the stage what they were reading here, because we didn't want to duplicate Bill Dempsey. We wanted to duplicate an honest way of presenting the business. So learn how to present it. Ali Rita is the #1 car salesman in the world. He finally beat what's his name? This is a compliment.
Joe Girard was.
Yeah, it's a compliment to Ali that I couldn't remember Joe Girard's name. That used to be like something would just spill out. But Ali, I told Ali, he said, "Well, would you be #1 if you came here to his dealership?" I said, well, history would say, yes, I've been #1 everywhere I went, but not immediately. But I tell you what I would do. Every time you turned around, you'd find my face right up against your ear and you're, listening to you. Because rather quickly, I would sound like an Ali Rita. What you do is work. And then in time, I'd personalize it and so on. But I would find out rather quickly what the top salesperson in the automobile business in the world is doing. What better source to learn from than Ali Rita?
Absolutely. Briefly about sales infiltration, Ben, because to me, and it's a lot about trust. I mean, sales infiltration is being able to build trust to such a level. You have a great example of some of your partners coming into your home and dispensing whatever services need to be dispensed, all without you knowing. And so the level of trust that is built is incredible. And yeah, why don't we expand a little bit on sales infiltration and things?
On that, you were asked me earlier, and I got off on something else and never answered your question. What did Napoleon Hill teach you? This will be quick. Somebody asked me this in an audience, from an audience one day, and I didn't know she was going to ask, and hadn't really thought about it. I don't like that. Name the 4 most important things. Well, he did 500 things for me to pick out 4s,
Yeah.
But I said, I looked up and I said, Jesus, don't fail me now. She wants the 3 or 4 most important things. And I said, integrity in all things, focus, because I'm a shiny object person. And action, take action. He used to call it dithering. Ben, you're dithering, take action. So That answers that question I never answered.
Thank you.
Refresh my mind on the most recent question.
We were talking about sales infiltration, chapter page 257. To
Okay.
me, it's a lot about
Here it
trust.
is. People buy from people. This is a phrase I coined 50 years ago, and recently, thanks to a friend of mine, added to. People buy from and do business with and like to be around people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. That's the new part that I tacked onto that. Now people say, well, yeah, but you've been in this 60 years, how long is it going to take me to build trust? If you follow sales infiltration, the answer is about 10 minutes max.
You have a great script there in the
Yeah, we establish trust. Here's how we're going to work. So that's the thing. I call it setting the table. We set the table. Hi, Mr. Prospect. You think I'm a liar, cheat, and thief. I think you're indecisive. Let's work through that. I'll be straight with you. You be straight with me. You got a question? Ask me. I will answer any question you have the nerve to ask. Fair enough? They always say fair enough. And I say, and by the same token, I get to ask you anything I want. Fair enough? Fair enough. So now, 30 minutes later, when they tell you they have to check with their brother-in-law in Cleveland, who's an accountant, before they make any financial decisions, I get to say, no, 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 no. 10 minutes ago, we agreed we wouldn't do that to each other. And with a little humor, I'll smile and say, you don't have a brother-in-law. If you did, he wouldn't live in Cleveland and he wouldn't be an accountant. So let's cut the crap.
Yeah.
What question have I not answered for you?
Yeah, exactly. Ben, this has been extremely insightful. Thank you very much. Thanks again for spending about an hour here today. And thank you very much.
My pleasure, sir. An honor.